On a cold night sprinkled with stars, as I curled up by the fireplace, surrounded by the faint glow of the fire and dancing shadows, I want to share a story with you. This is not just any tale, but a personal adventure filled with unresolved mysteries and profound family secrets. My father was the youngest of 5 children in a large family. Their father, my grandfather, passed away when my father was still a youth, leaving a void that my elders had to fill. In this web of responsibility and tradition, the eldest brother, whom I refer to as my uncle, naturally assumed the role of the invisible head of the family. My grandmother, a woman shaped by stringent gender biases, lived with my uncle. My memories of her are always tinged with coldness and distance, as if her presence was an insurmountable chasm. One day, a seemingly minor incident revealed the subtle dynamics within our family. My uncle's family had to go out, entrusting me with the temporary custody of their house keys. At the time, I was just an innocent child. Soon, my grandmother approached me, attempting to exchange a piece of candy she had for the keys. Her intention was clear, but even in my youth, I felt uncomfortable and chose to run away, avoiding this unpleasant transaction. In retrospect, the relationship between our family and my uncles always carried a certain subtle tension. My father worked in a factory and would occasionally bring home small prizes or food. My mother always made sure to share these little fortunes with our neighbors, especially with my uncle's family. Their life was not easy, particularly for my cousins, who always seemed particularly hungry and vulnerable. Despite our modest means, my parents always extended a helping hand. These warm gestures were like rays of sunlight in winter, bright and heartening. However, my feelings towards my grandmother were entirely different. She always seemed so unreachable, as if there was an invisible wall between us. Except on the days when we brought money to her, she seldom visited our home, and I never took the initiative to visit my uncles. In my young mind, her image was vague and distant. Then, in one autumn, a sudden event indelibly marked her image in my memory. The news of my grandmother's death struck like lightning, illuminating the long-hidden secrets within our family shadows. It was said that on the night of her death, everyone gathered at my uncle's house, where the coffin lay quietly in the yard, and my uncle suddenly decided that the children should keep vigil. My father's face was filled with discontent and hesitation, but under the pressure from the family, he reluctantly accepted the arrangement. That night, as I lay in a strange bed, my mind was filled with unease and confusion. In my dream, I stepped out the door into a world painted in shades of gray and yellow. It was eerily quiet, with not even a whisper of wind. Approaching the gate, I saw a large willow tree with a black trunk and drooping leaves, standing guard like a sentinel. Then my grandmother appeared, dressed in a clean, dignified white garment, beckoning me with a wave of her hand. I felt as if an invisible force pulled me towards her. We crossed the village, arriving at a small riverbank. On the opposite side, my grandmother turned and beckoned me to cross. Just as I was about to step forward, a large black dog suddenly appeared by her side, barking furiously at me. Its urgent, fierce barks in the silent world startled me, making me step back. I tried to call out to my grandmother, but she seemed not to hear me, only gesturing more urgently. When I woke up, I found myself in a hospital bed, with my mother sitting beside me, her eyes filled with worry and love. She explained that on that night, I had developed a sudden fever and became delirious. My great-uncle's eldest son had discovered me in time and alerted the adults. My parents rushed me to the hospital, where after several days of treatment, my condition gradually stabilized. This experience felt like a nightmare, both real and surreal. Later, my mother confided that my grandmother had intended to take me away that night. In our family, my sister and I were the only children, and I was the youngest. My mother viewed my grandmother's actions as a selfish choice, but fortunately the appearance of the large black dog might have been my final guardian. From then on, our family no longer spoke of my grandmother, as if she had never existed. I am not a superstitious person, but I believe there are things in this world that cannot be explained with words. This experience was a double-edged sword, making me cherish life more while leaving an eternal question in my heart.